Thank you, Atlanta. It's a real pleasure to be here. First and foremost, I want to give my deep thanks, heartfelt thanks to the entire Drupal Camp Atlanta team, and also all of you who are here today. Welcome to my session, which is Innovation is about more than just code. And many of you have probably seen some of my other talks that are really focused on me speaking the whole time. And so today I'm going to do something a little different. But first, let me just explain this title. Innovation is about more than just code. And I put this word just in there because you hear the word just put in front of a lot of different phrases, like, oh, that's just design. That's just project management. That's just usability. That's just accessibility. Well, it's time for us to say, well, that's just code. I want to talk about the things that are outside of code. I want to talk about the things that make all of our projects and all of our builds and all of the things that we build actually shine and actually have a meaningful impact beyond the technology. And I'm going to split this session today into two sections. I want to talk first about how we can innovate when it comes to building new experiences. And then secondly, I want to talk about how we can innovate when it comes to open source. But first, let me just quickly introduce myself. I'm Preston, as Kaleem said, so I don't need to actually say anything in this slide. But if you'd like to ping me on the hashtag here, more than just code, I also have Twitter, and you can reach out to me via email. As Kaleem already spoiled, thank you, I do have a book that is coming out at the end of the month. How many people have heard of Decoupled Drupal or are doing Decoupled Drupal? Wow. Okay, very cool. This book is the first ever comprehensive guide to decoupled Drupal across the stack, which means that if, regardless if you're working with JavaScript or mobile apps, or if you're working with the backend, Drupal, building APIs, this book is for you. It's going to be published at the end of the month. It's in production right now, and I'm very excited about it, and I would really appreciate your support. Check it out. It's going to be great. Pre-order on Amazon right now. I'm here on behalf of Acquia. I represent our Acquia Labs team, which is the innovation center at Acquia. We build a lot of really cool projects for customers that revolve around emerging technologies. So if you're interested in things like AR, VR, IoT, things like mixed reality, things like machine learning, please come and talk to me. We'd love to talk about how we can work with you on that kind of stuff. Last but not least, I promise this is the last advertisement slide. I am an organizer of a conference called Decoupled Drupal Days, which is in New York City. And we just had our second edition back in August. We're going to be doing it again next year. It's going to be back in New York City. And currently, we're estimating it'll be in June of 2019. So I'll let you know more information about this conference as it comes up. But please follow us on Twitter. We haven't been posting anything in a couple of months, but please follow us and keep up to date on what we're doing with that camp. All right, so I want to talk about what we're going to cover today. The first thing I want to do is, because we're in Georgia and because we're in Atlanta, I want to showcase one interesting case study that revolves around this idea of open innovation. Then I want to talk about some ways that you can work beyond code to actually make a huge impact on open source and also on Drupal. But first and foremost, innovation goes well beyond code. And I think today, a lot of us have felt that there's a lot of focus on the technology, there's a lot of focus on the engineering, there's a lot of focus on the build. But what about all the other components and all the other compelling aspects of everything that we work with that are so crucial to actually making what we build shine and be a successful product? Let's take a look at some of these experiences that are emerging today. Digital experiences today require more than just code. I mean, consider the fact that we have experiences today like wearable technology, which requires very substantial design and UX focus on very small screens. Consider also that we have digital signage today, and that also requires a considerable amount of design and a lot of back-end work beyond the code, beyond the hardware, beyond the software to make this experience work. Same thing with augmented reality, for instance. We have these issues where we have to build some of these new ideas and design some of these new places where we see our Drupal content headed. And voice assistants as well. What do voice assistants mean when it comes to how we think about everything beyond the code? And that's really where I want to go today. Digital experiences today require more than just code. Digital experiences today aren't just about building a website using HTML, CSS, PHP, Drupal. They require design, usability testing, documentation, accessibility, diversity and inclusion, and many other things that are extremely important to making sure that you have a successful project. But first, let me just talk about one case study that we have at Acquia Labs that many of you have probably seen. And I do apologize. All of the other videos, with the exception of these first two, are captioned and transcripted. I apologize for not having this one captioned, but the slides will have captions. So what's going on here? Well, we built about a year and a half ago in Acquia Labs a prototype that allows for you to use augmented reality and machine vision on your phone to be able to detect a product based on how it looks on the shelf and return certain content coming back from Drupal that will give you some information about the product. And here's what it looks like.
Navigating through a large or unfamiliar grocery store to find all the items on your list isn't any fun. Wouldn't it be great to have a shopping route which guides you to your items? What if you could learn more about an item simply by looking at it? Luckily, Alex uses the Freshland Market app on her smartphone. As Alex walks up to Freshland Market, the app pops up a notification. She taps it and a map of the store appears, showing where all of the items on her list are located. With the map as a guide, Alex walks over and grabs a bag of potato chips. When she looks at it with her smartphone, the app recognizes it and displays useful information like its price and user ratings. Alex checks the potato chips off her list in the app. Next is pasta sauce. Unfortunately, she's not sure which one she wants. With the help of the user reviews and ratings the app superimposes on top of the camera view, she can make an informed decision. This one looks perfect. Last up, cereal. Alex recently chose to avoid processed sugars and already configured the app to tell her if anything contains them. The app tells her that her favorite, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, isn't a good fit. Honey Nut Cheerios also have processed sugars. Finally, Alex checks a box of Rice Krispies cereal and bingo, low processed sugars. Suddenly, Alex sees a new notification suggesting that it might be time to buy milk to go with her cereal based on her purchase history. Good catch. The app updates the shopping route and redirects her to the dairy section. Shopping finished. Time to head to the checkout line.
So these experiences are really quite compelling these days, but I think one of the more interesting things about that project, for example, is that the code was actually a very small component. What went much more into how that worked was actually designing an experience that felt natural and actually being able to manage all of these different technologies that we had to harmonize across each other to make it work. And also, making that video, for example, and producing the work that shows what is possible with Drupal is a fundamental part of how we can showcase the innovation happening in open source communities like Drupal's. And so one of the things I want to really emphasize in this keynote today is that you don't need to write code to contribute to innovation. You don't need to write code to innovate. Let me just showcase one more example, because we're in Georgia, from another Acquia Labs project. How many of you have heard of Ask Georgia Gov? Ask Georgia Gov is the first ever Alexa skill that's available for citizens of the state of Georgia to ask questions that are relevant to daily life as a Georgia citizen, whether it's renewing a driver's license or registering to vote or enrolling in pre-K, or even who Georgia's governor is. That's Nathan Deal, and the only reason I know that is because of this project. But let's just show, I want to show you just a piece of what this functionality looks like, and then talk very briefly about some of the non-code aspects that went into this, and how exactly we discovered that the code ended up being about 5% of this project, and 5% of the challenges and obstacles that we faced.
Alexa, ask Georgia Gov.
Welcome to Georgia Gov. Feel free to ask a question.
How do I get my driver's license?
Does this sound helpful? Getting and renewing a driver's license.
Sure.
The Department of Driver Services helps you earn, renew, or replace learner's permits and licenses. To carry a full license for everyday, non-commercial vehicles, you must be at least 16 years old. You'll pay $32 to renew your license for 8 years. You can save $5, however, if you renew your license online.
I just moved. How do I transfer my out-of-state license?
Does this sound useful? I'm a new state resident. How do I transfer my license?
Yes.
To apply for a license, you should schedule an appointment and gather your current out-of-state license, social security number, proof of Georgia residency, bank statements, utility bills, and rental contracts all work, and proof of identity, birth certificates, passports, or immigration ID cards. At the appointment, you'll surrender your former license, pay the license fee, and receive a temporary license. Your permanent license will arrive by mail just a few weeks later.
Give me that phone number.
The number for the Georgia Department of Driver Services is 404-657-9300. If you need that number again, say repeat.
Repeat.
That number again is 404-657-9300. If you have another question, feel free to ask it. Otherwise, you can say exit.
Exit.
Who caught the Dreester egg in that video? It's something I have people comment on a lot. So this project was really interesting because, one of the things that we had to do was, number one, state and local governments, we know this very well. They have small editorial teams, small budgets. You can't really maintain two different tracks of content. And the other thing that we wanted to make sure to do with this project was to uphold this idea of open source innovation. Today, actually, if you go to drupal.org/project/Alexa, we actually took this module that we built for Drupal 7 and Drupal 8, and it's available on drupal.org right now. You can put it on your website today and begin using it to actually build your own Alexa skill that relies on Drupal. But enough about the code. I want to talk a little bit more about things that we actually found were unexpectedly obstacles in this project. One of the books that I have read over the last couple of years repeatedly, or the last year repeatedly, and have found extremely well written and very interesting from the standpoint of conversational interfaces is Erica Hall's book, Conversational Design. And if you're interested in things like chatbots or voice assistants or voice-based interfaces, I highly recommend you check out this book. One of the things that Erica Hall mentions in her book is this idea of key moments in all of the conversational interfaces that we use on a daily basis that are successful. And that includes things like introduction, making the user trust the interface, orientation, having system options, and these dedicated actions that lead to a certain goal. And of course, guidance, which is giving instructions to the user, and feedback, very important things when it comes to usability. And we actually discovered that the challenge that we faced in this project wasn't the code. It wasn't actually implementing the Alexa skill. It was actually very simple to build the Alexa skill and also build the Drupal module. What was clear was to make this something that was designed well and tested well, and also something that we knew that everyone could use in a graceful way. As you can see, one of the things that we did is work very hard to design the language and write the language in such a way that we could make sure everyone could use this skill appropriately. And the other thing that we actually did in regard to this skill is that we actually also designed the flow. Alexa skills and voice assistants have a very particular idea of information architecture that differs significantly from the way that websites and traditional interfaces that we use on a daily basis actually provide structural information to users. So all of this is to say, and we also did usability testing as well, and we found that this is a very important and crucial step. You can't skip it when it comes to conversational interfaces. We actually went through 2 separate rounds. The first round was a complete disaster. It was complete chaos. And we actually had to end it early. And we learned very quickly that we're going to spend more than 90% of our time actually working on the design, on the usability, and on things that will actually make this a skill that works really well. The code was actually secondary. And I think one of the things that is important to realize is that beyond code, there's all sorts of things that require help. There's all sorts of things that require support that go well beyond the technology, that go well beyond the lines of code that run across our screen like the Matrix. This project required things like documentation, content strategy, information architecture, things that we oftentimes take for granted. And when you think about the fact that many Georgians who use things like assistive technology, screen readers, and so on and so forth, are relying on accessibility, relying on your provision of these capabilities beyond just what you see in the code, you have to think that this has to be something more human. Technology is something that enables us to be more human, to actually innovate in a way that increases our humanity. And this is why I believe very strongly that you don't need to write code to contribute to innovation in digital experiences. Whether you're a test subject in a usability study, whether you're a designer, whether you're an accessibility consultant, whether you're somebody who advocates for diversity and inclusion, these are all components of how open source communities and how we can innovate when it comes to the things that we build. You don't need to write code to contribute to innovation in open source software. And to illustrate this, what I did is something very unusual that I haven't done before. Rather than spend this entire time talking on just my own, I asked a few of my friends in the Drupal community to record some videos and audio of their own experiences and how they've contributed to open source and Drupal beyond code. Because when we think about it, it is really just code. What's really important is all the things that revolve around it. Drupal.org, the community, events like this one, meetups, all of these aspects of our open source software are extremely critical to furthering the longevity of our project. So let's start with a few ideas, starting with possibly the most adjacent to the code, which is writing things like documentation and help text.
There are multiple ways of contributing back to the Drupal community, even if you don't want to contribute code. You can write documentation that is missing. You can create issues that you see. You can test solutions that developers have created for other issues. There are so many important initiatives going on in the Drupal community that doesn't require coding knowledge at all. For example, the documentation initiative led by Matt Grasmek. This is not at all about code and more about improving the structure and architecture of the documentation, which is extremely important in improving Drupal adoption.
Documentation is key. And even if you're a developer, documentation is something that everyone relies on. It's something that enables others to understand your project, to really gain that deep understanding of what's going on deep inside the code. And it also enables further adoption, which is exactly what Lindsay said.
Have a look at the default Drupal installation. You don't see any functionality yet, but you see lots of words. You see descriptions, labels, buttons, and actually a few hundred pages full of them. Have you ever wondered who writes them? Or have you ever looked at a module that you haven't used before and you can't quite figure out how it works? So you search around and at some point you go, ah, that's what they meant. Why didn't they just say it clearly? The answer is quite simple, because the developers know their modules too well. So writing and changing these text is a contribution that me and others do. It's a way of improving usability. It's not code, but it is in the code, and therefore thousands of Drupal users will see it. So if you somewhat know your way around Drupal, but you don't know the ins and outs of a specific module, then you are one of the best people to help writing this text.
How many people have ever opened up a new Drupal installation and been totally confused the first time that you ever installed Drupal? This is exactly the kinds of things that are often forgotten, I think, in many software projects, is that help text, the things that help guide you and get you to the places you need to go. And it really is the first entry point for a lot of users in any open source project. And if you're somebody who codes or doesn't code, or doesn't want, actually, you can do this as well. You can write help text that helps those users understand the software better. And it's something that I find to be one of the most important contributions you can make to the project. Next, let's talk a little bit more about things that are further afield, like sharing your knowledge and sharing your expertise. Some of the aspects that we have in this event, for example, the fact that we have sessions, we're sharing our knowledge, we're sharing our experience with each other, is one of the most important things that we can do to further the Drupal community and also foster innovation in terms of the future state of our amazing project.
I started being involved with open content about 2 decades ago when I started translating W3C specs. While I was learning how to build web pages, I figured I could just as well share the same information with others. And then when I turned to creating dynamic web pages and found PHP, I went through the same route of translating the PHP documentation, figuring out the English sources were not right, reading the PHP source code, to figure out what was the right way to document the behavior, and then fixing the English text and then translating it to Hungarian. I never wrote a single line of C for the PHP source code, but I read a lot of the PHP source. And then when I started using Drupal, I carried over the same approach. That was not translatable to Hungarian, so I worked on fixing those and then doing the translations to Hungarian, and got very heavily involved with organizing events for the web in general, PHP and Drupal as well. So I was organizing several conferences. And then I also found out that there's a lot of other people who are interested in doing things. So I turned into enabling others to do their best and trying to unblock their work and trying to find others who are interested in the same things and help coordinate their work, because that enabled them to become their best and move open source forward as much as possible.
And this is a key here. And I think one of the things I would love to see all of you do is take something that you know, and it could be something very small. Write an article, put it up on your blog, put it up on someone else's blog, put it up on an e-zine, on a magazine that's online, and share what you know. Because the more that you share your own knowledge and your own expertise, you can help others learn from the mistakes and the lessons learned and some of the best practices that you've learned over the years and succeed in the process. And I do want to recognize all the speakers here at Drupal Camp Atlanta who have taken the time to prepare all the presentations today, because that is part of what makes this community so great. It's part of what helps us as a community move forward. And that's something that you don't find outside of open source. It's something that's really meaningful and really, really touching for my heart, at least, because that's something I do as well. I love to write articles. I love to write blog posts. I love to write and speak, because it really is something that is the most rewarding thing that anyone can do in this kind of realm. When you see that face light up in the audience, when you see that person finally understand in that training what that concept was that they struggled with for so long, it's an incredibly impactful experience. Next, let's talk about some events like this one. Drupal Camp Atlanta, this is my first time here, actually. I'm very glad to be here. And the fact that we have a vast ecosystem of local meetups and conferences and camps and events that are global and international, where we actually have the opportunity to meet people who are interested in the same things we are, who want to work with us and collaborate with us on the things that we are interested in as well. Take, for example, the fact that when people come together, amazing things happen. How many people have been to other events besides Drupal Camp Atlanta? Great. And how many people is this your first Drupal event? Wonderful. Well, I want to say to you all, welcome. We have a lot of great events in the Drupal community, and I highly recommend that you try to see if there's a way to get to DrupalCon or another Drupal camp. These small events are some of the things that really define the way that the Drupal community operates and the way that the Drupal community really has found its success as a community. Let's start with a couple of people who have found events and going to these events to be some of the most important things that you can do to help foster innovation in Drupal.
Hi, my name is Amber Matz, and here are some ways you can get involved with Drupal without writing a line of code. Find and connect with your local Drupal meetup. Half the battle is already over for you. You're at a local camp, so good job. But get involved with your local meetup, which might meet weekly or monthly. Go to groups.drupal.org and do a geographical search, or go to meetup.com, which is another popular place for organizers to list their Drupal meetups. Help find speakers, give a talk of your own, give a demo on what you're working on. Those are all helpful ways to connect. Also, just show up. Meet other people in the Drupal community. It might help you find your next job, or you might be able to help someone else find another great job. So that is a very important way to contribute. Check out these issue queues, like the official docs queue and the Drupal.org community section. Reviews are needed there that have to do with documentation and usability and is this helpful or not. You don't have to know how to write a patch to review those types of issues. Join the Drupal Slack at drupal.org/Slack. Join the channels that interest you and connect with others. Have a great time at your camp. Hi, kitty. And maybe I'll see you at the next Drupal event.
Oops. I know we all want to see that kitty again.
Open source innovation is driven by people. people of all sorts, people working together, sharing strengths, and sharing skills. The idea that innovation comes from some solo genius programmer is a dangerous and useless myth. I've been involved in the Drupal community for a long time. I started out organising events. I went on to be elected to serve on the board of the Drupal Association, and I've served as the first chair of the community working group, helping to formulate our first conflict resolution guidelines. Organising events is one of the most rewarding things you can do, whether it's regular local meetups, arranging cheap or free global training days, or stepping up to run an annual camp in your area. Bringing people together to share what they know, to learn new things, and to get involved is so important. And you can help in a huge number of different ways. It is, in my view, one of the most powerful ways to fuel innovation and engagement in open source.
I couldn't agree more with those words by Donna. And this is where I want to talk a little bit about organizing events and organizing local associations and local meetups and local events. For a lot of folks, it seems very daunting to organize an event, to put together a camp like this. And by the way, let's just give a big round of applause to the whole team who organized this event. Because I know from my own experience with decoupled days that it is a very large amount of work. And the way that we can foster greater innovation as well is by bringing these people together in venues where we can talk about these things and make people feel heard, make people feel like they have a place in the community. Oftentimes, when we're hidden by these screens, we're hidden behind these avatars, it's tough to realize that behind all of these images, behind all these profiles, we're actually real people. And having events and fostering events and hosting events is a great way to contribute to innovation in our community as well. I highly encourage all of you, if you're coming from other places in the country or around the world, if you have a local community that is growing, that is in need of a meetup, consider starting one of your own. There's a lot of people who are interested in sponsoring those kinds of events. A lot of companies will gladly offer space in the evenings for you to start your own meetup.
Oi, Atlanta. Meu nome é Vanessa, eu sou da comunidade Drupal Brasil, sou aqui de São Paulo, e eu estou participando da comunidade do Drupal ativamente desde 2008, e desde que eu comecei a participar da comunidade, isso foi muito gratificante para mim, porque eu não precisei contribuir com o código desde o início para eu conseguir conhecer pessoas e eu conseguir compartilhar conhecimento, trocar ideias, trocar experiências, conversar com gente de todo lugar do mundo, de todas as comunidades Drupal, de diversos lugares. Então, para mim, isso por experiência própria, contribuir com a comunidade foi muito além do código, assim. Hoje atualmente sou presidente da Associação Drupal Brasil, então a gente consegue contribuir com realização de eventos, realização de Drupal Camps e Drupal Days, onde a gente consegue trocar experiências e conhecer muita gente, assim, e é muito gratificante isso. Isso é contribuir com a comunidade.
And this is how we can also inspire others in their communities to do amazing work as well. And I've known Vanessa for a long time. She's one of my good friends. And the work that you can do and the work that you often see in these local communities, these regional communities, is nothing short of extraordinary. And it's something that I really find to be one of the most compelling aspects of the Drupal community, is that we have such a strong network and a strong idea of being in this together and all being in this in a way that moves all of open source forward as well. So what are some things that you can do? Well, check out DrupalCal. Check out groups.drupal.org/events. Look at some of the events that are happening in your area. Chances are there's a local meetup not too far away, or there's a camp that happens every year not too far away as well. Also consider event organizing. One of the things that we event folks do is we have a Slack of our own, which is the Drupal Event Organizer Slack, where we can trade best practices, exchange ideas, help support each other when we're running on 1 hour of sleep and it's 4 a.m. and we have to go and do load-in at the event and it's a huge mess, and this is a very great place to be. Start a new conference in your area, something that you can do. It's something that is actually not that much work, and we can help you with that. And event organizing is something that's deeply rewarding. I'm sure that all of you who organize your own events in your local communities also know this as well. It's really amazing to see people come together and actually learn and grow from these experiences, because that actually leads to further amazing things happening in the community as well, and also in the software itself when it comes to all of these other things that happen in sprints, that happen in mentored sprints, that happen outside of these sprints, in just the hallway track as well. So events are very important, and I think they're one of the most under-recognized aspects of Drupal today, as well as open source in general. We wouldn't have the kind of momentum and the kind of amazing ideas and amazing development and amazing progress that we have in open source without these events. Foster environments where people can innovate together, whether it's a sprint, whether it's a contribution day. One of the things I know that many people do is have virtual contrib days. I know that the Drupal Diversity Inclusion Group just had a virtual contribution day. These are things that are really meaningful because it brings people together. You can meet some new friends, and you can say, hey, let's work on this really cool thing together and move the project forward. It's something that I love to participate in whenever I can. There's also things that you can do that are more on the creative side. If you want to use your left brain a little bit more and actually work on things like the user experience, things like designing and style guides and wireframes, and the things that actually will help the interfaces of Drupal move forward in a way that's really compelling. You can also design new Drupal interfaces as well. Take the fact that design and user experience often outweigh code in importance, and I think that that's actually the first place. I think a lot of us, for example, in the room, have adopted a design-first mentality that allows us to consider that, well, the code should really be secondary, and we should not even really be considering that until after we've thought about how this should look and how this should behave and how people will use it of all different backgrounds. People who are using screen readers, people who are using refreshable braille displays. By the way, as a quick side note, how many people have ever used a screen reader on their browser, like Chromevox, for example, that old extension? I highly recommend, if you are somebody who builds websites, if you're somebody who works on a team that builds websites, I highly recommend that you install one of these extensions and try it out for a day, because it will give you the most interesting amount of ideas when it comes to how to write content and how to design for that content. Using a screen reader is one of the most eye-opening experiences that I've ever had, and I routinely, whenever I do any site builds, I still, to this day, always use a screen reader at least once to see how it sounds. Because if you don't do that, you're forgetting about a whole subset of users. And that's something that you can't really capture necessarily in the code. It's not something that you actually write in the code. It's not logic. It's not a function that you write. It's something that you have to make as part of your methodology. And that's something that I think is very important to remember.
In my experience, the easier way to get involved in open source is by organizing events, because it will promote its growth. It will help spreading the work by teaching, but it will also create situations where things get done. And also any development will need design or documentation, for example, and those are fields where there's not many people willing to help. I'm a designer and a front-end developer, but I started helping with event organizations. And when I felt more confident, then is when I jumped into other kind of contributions like UX or design, for example. And because of that, I've known a lot of people, and I've learned about other fields like accessibility, for example, just by collaborating with other volunteers.
And today, Drupal has one of the most robust accessibility gates, some of the most robust accessibility guidelines of any software project on the web. And it's all thanks to the fact that we have people who are focused on the fact that there are differences in the ways that we use all of the software that we have on a daily basis. So if you are somebody who's a creative professional, if you're somebody who's a designer, consider going into some of the design issue queues and contributing a new prototype or a new wireframe or a new design. It could be something that you've done on Sketch, for example. And consider working with Drupal's usability team, for example. We have a very large team focused on how we can assess and look at how end users work with Drupal and how we can improve the ways that people interact with Drupal on a daily basis. And as I just mentioned as well, accessibility is extremely important. We have to make sure for many decades to come that accessibility remains a paramount consideration within the Drupal project. We want to design the experiences that others will implement. By providing those designs, eventually they will be built, and we can help guide the process by which those are built as well. Oftentimes when we focus on just the code and we get mired in those monospace code editors, we're only thinking about how we want to build the logic and organize the application. We're not necessarily thinking about the ways in which people will actually use the software. And over the course of Drupal 8's development cycle, for example, I think there have been some incredible innovations when it comes to how people will eventually use these interfaces, like in place editing, for example, and so on and so forth. And even today, for example, with a lot of the work that's going on in the Admin UI initiative, a lot of that work is extremely revolutionary when it comes to how we can use our software and how it will change in the future as well. And speaking of getting involved in those kinds of initiatives, it's really one of those things that I actually appreciate the most is the fact that we have a large list of community initiatives that are all pursuing tracks of innovation in their own areas. And you can get involved in those too, whether you're a project manager, whether you're somebody who knows Scrum, does Agile, whether you're somebody who just wants to give feedback or post an issue. These initiatives are very, very active and will definitely be grateful for any help that you can provide. Because community initiatives are what drive Drupal's momentum in particular directions. They're very important for the health and the longevity of Drupal.
So Preston was looking for ideas of ways that people can get involved in Drupal and contribute back, but that don't involve writing code. So I have two ideas for you. The first one is the Promote Drupal initiative. This is basically a big marketing campaign for Drupal. So if you're into writing brand guidelines, doing design, writing copy, editing copy, you can come get involved in that. And to do that, come to the Promote Drupal Slack channel. And the other one is the Admin UI initiative. There's a user study that's going on as part of that initiative to look at how content editors and other people use Drupal. And we're doing user testing and trying to get input from editors themselves, doing surveys and other kinds of tests. So if you're into user research, design, or if you're a project manager, or you want to learn these things, then come join us. And that's the Admin UI Slack channel.
And here, Suzanne does a really good job of summarizing some of the most recent initiatives that have been very much featured in some of Dries' keynotes and in the Drupal community at large. There are also other initiatives that you can also be a part of, like the documentation initiative that Lindsay mentioned earlier, or the out-of-the-box initiative, which assists with designs of how we can make Drupal a more easily demoable system. And of course, and I'm repeating this, the Promote Drupal initiative, where if you're somebody who works in marketing and sales and you want to encourage others to give Drupal a try and help people really trial Drupal and try it out, this is an initiative that could be for you as well. But community initiatives, in my opinion, constitute Drupal's lifeblood, and they are these tracks that we know that we can go down that will yield amazing, innovative solutions for the future of Drupal for many years to come. But we're missing one big thing, which is, as I mentioned, code is really meant to enable us to actually be more than who we are today. It's something, technology is really not something that is meant to be artificial. It's meant to enable us to have better human interactions. We want to become more human through open source, and open source helps us actually become human through code as well, and through these projects that we all build together, through this collaboration that we have, through these communities, and through the things that we all work on together. So the last thing I want to mention, which is, of course, last but not least, is diversity and inclusion. And in recent years, this has become a very important topic, not only in the Drupal community and open source, but also at large in the wider world of technology. I believe very strongly that diversity and inclusion is one of the most fundamental pieces, the most fundamental foundations that allow for innovation to happen in any given community. If you don't have a code of conduct, for example, if you don't have a way for people to feel welcomed and feel safe and feel like they have a home wherever they are, it's something that will lead to them never contributing in the first place. And think of all the people who we may have lost over the course of many years because they didn't feel at home in the communities that we have built for them. We need to ensure that marginalized groups, people who are underrepresented in our community, have a seat at the table, because you never know what insights they'll bring. You never know what ideas they'll bring. You never know what sorts of new tracks of innovation we can pursue thanks to these diverse ideas that come into play, and thanks to the different perspectives that people can bring. I'm sorry, there's a mistake here. This is Tara King.
There are lots of ways to give back to an open source project that don't have anything to do with the code, but are rather focused on the health of the community. I like to give my volunteer time to Drupal diversity and inclusion. We're an all-volunteer, totally independent collective of Drupal community members who've come together to make sure that Drupal is a safe, welcoming, inclusive place for underrepresented and marginalized individuals. That means we're working on speaker diversity at Drupal events, we're working on helping people network and get jobs, and we're working on elevating the voices of the marginalized so that they can be part of major Drupal discussions. If that sounds fun to you, there's a lot of work to do, so come on into Drupal Slack. We're there at Diversity-Inclusion, and we'd love to say hi.
And my sincere apologies to Tara. This is a mistake on the slide. Tara King is at Pantheon. Her D.O username is Sparkling Robots, and she's also on Twitter as Sparkling Robots. My apologies. So I want to end this particular section by saying that part of innovating as a community and part of building the future of Drupal is by guaranteeing that Drupal is welcoming and safe for all. And I would like to recommend that all of you consider this whenever you are at a new event, whether you're organizing an event, whether you're looking at ways to improve your local meetup. These are all things that are important. These are all things that help to bring people into the community and make them succeed in ways that will help us in the long run as well. So I want to end here with a couple of suggestions of what you can do for Drupal. I want to take a moment to have some takeaways from this session that will help enable you also to contribute to innovation in this community. The first is we all need to remember this, and I think all of us who are developers, all of us who are engineers need to remember that the work that we do in many ways is secondary. The work that we do to build and develop these experiences, to build and develop and work on these open source projects is secondary to all of the other aspects that enable us to do that in the first place. Whether that's event organizing, whether that's accessibility or usability testing. These are things that enable us to have success in the long run as well and to be more innovative as well. So here are some suggestions. As I mentioned before, please share your knowledge, write documentation, write some help text, and write some articles. Give some sessions. Submit a session to some of the local camps. Many of the local camps are more than willing to accept first-time speakers or underrepresented speakers who are less visible in a lot of the conferences that we see in technology today. And it's something that I find very rewarding because it helps you also become very good at what you do. The best way to learn something is by teaching it. Next, join your local meetup. Help organize events. Join the Drupal Camp Atlanta team if you're here locally. Or if you're somewhere else in Georgia, consider organizing a local meetup there. And also, join some of the Slacks for these meetups. Join some of the local Slacks that we have, the regional organizations that we have. Also, help design and help envision the next generation of these interfaces that we're building for Drupal, these exciting new ideas that we want to put into Drupal. And get involved in some of these community initiatives that are already ongoing, that are pursuing amazing goals and have very complex missions that we all need to contribute to help them succeed. And finally, let's ensure that our community is a welcoming place for everyone. Let's ensure that we have a place for everyone to contribute in a way that they feel safe and welcomed. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being here with you today in Atlanta, and I hope that this was a useful session for you. Thank you.